May God open our ears to hear, our eyes to see, our hearts to love. Doesn't it make a difference to sing the biblical story, to enter into it in ways that are not just about listening with our heads, but responding with our hearts? Last Wednesday was Ash Wednesday, the first Sunday in Lent. At our small Ash Wednesday service at Pitt Street and at the Inner West Neighbourhood Group, which also had an Ash Wednesday service, we used ash made from last year's palms that we had here on Palm Sunday. Palms mixed with water to symbolise the living water of baptism and oil to symbolise healing. Ash which symbolically invited us to come back to earth, to wonder at the gift of life, my life, our life with the earth, the shared body of existence. Ash which reminded us of our humanity. The remainder of that ash has been placed symbolically on the communion table today. So today is the first Sunday in Lent, and on this day we reflect on the wilderness experience of Jesus. Traditionally, Lent has been a season of abstinence or self-denial, a time for doing without, a time of fasting. I went to the supermarket last week to buy some tea light candles for the Ash Wednesday service, and while I was there I picked up a block of dark fair trade chocolate, as you do. And looking at the tea lights and the chocolate, the woman at the checkout asked me if I was planning a romantic evening for Valentine's Day. And I told her that the candles were for Ash Wednesday, for our service at church, and the chocolate I planned to eat for nourishment, pleasure and energy. She was quite familiar with Lent and was surprised that I was buying chocolate, assuming that if I was observing Lent, I would also be abstaining from chocolate, as if. I explained that my Lenten commitment involved some small attempts to take up some life-giving practices rather than giving up things that were actually essential aspects of enjoying my life. So my Lenten disciplines this year are to swim more, to meditate more, and to work with other people of goodwill to do everything I possibly can to stop 67 children and their families being transferred to Nauru. Abstinence and self-denial have been the Lenten way, according to much of our broad church tradition, and today wine and chocolate seem to be the most common things that I hear people are giving up for Lent. That we might rekindle our faith and be blessed during Lent, yes, certainly that. But I'm not so sure about abstinence and self-denial, though I do know that such practices are meaning for some of our community, and I don't want to denigrate that. But I would hope also that Lent might be for some of us a time of doing with, doing more rather than doing without, a time to take up rather than to give up, a time of self-discovery and self-affirmation, a time to claim our connectedness. A source of light and life for my spiritual journey as Lent has begun has been dipping into Jan Richardson's latest book, which is titled Circle of Grace. And so today, after what has been a rather huge week, I'm drawing on her insights about how we enter again this season of renewal. This year, Easter is going to be very early, and honestly, Ash Wednesday seemed to come far too quickly. We had only 5 Sundays after Epiphany, whereas some years there are 8. The entry into the year of Luke's Gospel seems hurried. Baby in the manger, Jesus getting lost in the temple, baptism in the Jordan, and with some attention to stories that actually occur after the temptations, we're into the desert. It's all been a bit rushed, really. So let's slow down and revisit a moment on the journey, one that we did not really attend to this year because we celebrated Epiphany rather than the baptism of Jesus. Jan Richardson suggests that Jesus went into the desert with the baptismal waters of the Jordan still clinging to him. But also clinging to him was the way he was named by God at the moment of baptism. when a voice from the heavens announced, "This is my beloved. This is my beloved." Jesus' spirit quest did not begin in alienation from the holy, but in being named by grace as beloved. That name sustained him in what lay ahead: wilderness, hunger, loneliness, and temptation. Jan Richardson suggests that we also go into the wilderness of Lent with that name, that we know ourselves as beloved. Jesus shared our humanity, and we share with him the gift of grace, of being beloved of the sacred. So on this first Sunday of Lent, we are invited to enter into the terrain of the season, knowing, claiming that we are beloved. There is much that lies ahead of us that we do not know, but of this we can be sure: each one of us is beloved. This book that I've been reading, Circle of Grace, contains a blessing for the beloved community as we enter Lent. It is titled, "Beloved is Where We Begin," and I want to share it with you today. If you would enter into the wilderness, do not begin without a blessing. Do not leave without hearing who you are, beloved, named by the one who has travelled this path before you. Do not go without letting it echo in your ears. And if you find it is hard to let it into your heart, do not despair. That is what this journey is for. I cannot promise this blessing will free you from danger, from fear, from hunger or thirst, or from the scorching sun or the fall of the night. But I can tell you that on this path there will be help. I can tell you that on this way there will be rest. I can tell you that you will know the strange graces that come to our aid only on a road such as this, that fly to meet us bearing comfort and strength, that come alongside us for no other cause than to lean themselves toward our ear and with their curious insistence whisper our name, beloved, beloved, beloved. So from this assurance, may we face what lies ahead of us. My hope is for Lent to become 40 days where we can uncover and discover once again our possibilities for our own connectedness to the sacred, to the earth, to our fellow creatures. Self-discovery and connectedness rather than self-denial and isolation. Lent, seen as life-affirming discovery rather than life-denying, says we are not judged by our past, but perhaps by the way we relate to our past. A time of reflection and real change, of transformation, changing our minds, changing our hearts, that we might be changed and so change the world. In the life of Jesus, we see someone who felt called to break the culture of violence characterized by a tit-for-tat mentality of revenge and reprisal. The biblical story tells us of Jesus' 40 days in the wilderness, full of the Holy Spirit and fresh from his baptism. Jesus led into the wilderness. In whatever way we understand the complexities of this story, it is clear that Jesus, like shamans before and after him, must go on a vision quest in order to clarify his vocation, to claim his future as God's beloved child. The devil is not the central character in the story, even though it plays the role of Jesus' tempter. Although many of us no longer believe in a personal devil, we can appreciate the reality of temptation in our lives. Temptation is by nature seductive. We are seldom tempted by bad things, which is why a focus on chocolate and alcohol seems a bit trivial to me. But as Jesus' temptations revealed, People are tempted by good things that stand in the way of realizing our true vocation. There is nothing inherently wrong with security, power, and comfort, the three temptations that Jesus faced, except as they, security, power, and comfort, alienate us from others and from God's vision for our lives. Indeed, facing temptation can strengthen our spiritual lives if we, following the example of Jesus, face our temptations in the presence of the sacred. Jesus' sojourn in the desert is profoundly Christological. Jesus is tempted, truly tempted. He is not perfect or immune to the human condition in all its ambiguity. Jesus is tempted as a whole person who is able to choose for or against his destiny as God's healer and messenger. God's aims are never compelling, nor does God's plan include every detail of our lives. God's impetus, God's passion for us, calls us to creativity, not to passive obedience. God wills us to improvise, to colour outside the lines in ways that bring beauty and justice to the world and joy to our lives. Likewise, the reading from Deuteronomy describes a habit of generosity and gratitude. In giving God and implicitly the faith community and the world our first fruits, we acknowledge our dependence on God's graceful care and the generosity of the universe. Open-hearted generosity is not accidental, but a spiritual virtue that arises from an ongoing commitment to share what we have with God and with the vulnerable in our midst. This generosity is lived out day to day in simple acts of kindness and care, as well as more dramatic gifts to the community, such as the offer of sanctuary to people who are fleeing persecution. Sharing our first fruits allows God's abundant life to flow through us more energetically and dynamically. Our lives grow in meaning, and our vision of the universe expands as we recognize the essential interdependence of all life. This is the heart of Eucharistic living, the remembrance of all that God has done through creation and evolution of the universe, the inspiration of prophets and wise women and men, and the evolving movements of the Spirit in our time. Sharing the bread and the cup and our first fruits connects us with all things and allows us to become channels of blessing to the world. We discover that it is a blessing to bless others. We are beloved, and we are called to be the beloved community. God's generosity is for everyone. Today, divine generosity calls the church to experience God's revelation in the many varieties of human experience: religiosity, sexuality, ethnicity, and nationality. God's universal love does not depend on us. It is freely given, but it takes the shape of our love and our willingness to be God's partners in protecting the vulnerable and in healing the world. So may it be. Amen.